I did hear you say that the problem you have or had, the problem that happened with this child at 6 years old is a problem that has a high recidivism rate. So it's kind of like an alcoholic. Did they teach you that?
Yes, ma'am.
So it really, for you, is going to be an issue for the rest of your life that you'll have to fight.
And I can't tell you how refreshing, rejuvenating it is for me to hear someone in the parole board member, our victim's advocate, Ms. Stapleton, say the obvious, which is no, you're always going to be a risk. What you have is a risk. You're not a low risk. You're not a low risk score. And they don't bring up the risk score in this hearing. And maybe the parole board is tired of it as we are. What I'm going to do is unpack this hearing with that low risk score, that 10-point questionnaire, so we can just look over the absurdity of it. Anyways, with that, let's jump in.
Okay, all righty. Morning for a minute. And let's see, Mr. Brian Barr.
Yes, sir.
Am I saying that right? Barr? Bauer, okay. All right. Okay, welcome. This is the parole board that you're going to be talking to. This is Carolyn Stapleton. We got that right. I'm Steve Prater, and Pete Freeman's to my right. And we're going to be talking to you about why you feel like you deserve to be paroled. Okay, Warden, we appreciate you being there and hosting us again. And would you introduce the staff that's in the room with you?
Yes, sir. Michelle Dozot, Warden. Brenda Ackland, Deputy Warden. Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Savage. Kristen Barber, Classification.
Danny Henshaw, Classification. James Arnold, Deputy Warden.
Okay, thank y'all for hosting us today. And Brian, is it okay if I call you Brian?
Yes, sir.
Bauer? Okay. Brian, what we want you to do, first off, we want you to talk to us and tell us why you feel like you should be paroled. Then we're going to go and listen to the warden as far as to tell us what kind of inmate you've been. Then we're going to hear from Melissa Bauer, and she's going to be your mother. She's going to be speaking on your behalf. And also not to speak, but we have the victim's mother and the victim's grandmother, or grandfather, that are going to be listening in, but they're not going to take part, but they also are Zooming and can hear what's going on. So I wanted you to know everything that's going on. So right now, let's start off by you telling us why you feel like that you are worthy of and deserving of being paroled.
Well, I do want to start off by saying thank y'all for allowing me this opportunity. I'm sorry, I'm pretty nervous on this too, so you might have to bear with me for just a minute.
Yes, we will.
This has been a pretty tough experience going through prison. You know, it's something that I've never actually witnessed nor thought of ever before. And going through the programs and stuff that I have been in here, they have helped me along the way to see my problem and to help me overcome the problem. You know, I'll say this too, you know, I have a 7-year-old son that I've never seen, and that has been pretty rough. That hurts. Also, for watching what my mother has been through, for what I have done and put my mother through, that is not something I would ever want to do ever again. I am very sorry for what I have done towards the family, the victim's family. I never meant to cause any harm or any kinds of problems like that. I really don't know what else to say.
Okay. We appreciate that statement, and you'll have another chance if you want later to say anything else that you have. Warden, what kind of an inmate is Brian being?
Brian hasn't had any real infractions, the whole time he's been here or throughout his incarceration. He is currently works in our maintenance department. He's a medium custody honor inmate and works in the maintenance department with the electrician. He's completed a sex offender program, victim awareness, anger management, and reentry. He does have an approved residence plan to live with his grandmother. He's quiet, he stays to himself, but as far as any disciplinary issues, we don't have any of that with Brian here at David Wade.
Right, thank you, Warden. All right, we will go now to hear from Miss Melissa Bauer, your mom. Melissa, there you go.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to start by saying that of course, he's my son, and I would love to see him be released. I can't imagine the hurt and the things that the victim and her family have had to overcome. There's no words to that you can make up for what happened and what she's had to overcome since then. But in his favor, he has from the very beginning taken responsibility for what happened. He turned himself in, he confessed, and he's done everything that's been asked of him since he's been there. He's taken every class that's been asked of him to take. He has tried to take some other classes that may not have been available yet or what have you. From the very first opportunity that he had to work, he reached out asking to be able to work, and has continued to do so. He's had no discipline issues, and I think that he's done a tremendous amount of growing up. I think he's had to figure out who he is as a person. He's had to address some issues of his own that were maybe things that he didn't want to acknowledge, and some things that most people did not know that occurred to him as well. If he's released, obviously he will have to attend, meetings. He will have to report to, his probation officer, parole officer, what have you. But I do believe that with those classes and what he's learned so far, that he's learned how to ensure that something like that would not happen again, and how to be a productive member of society, which is something that we all want to see happen for a prisoner. And other than that, like I said, we just want to make sure that he's the best person that he can be, and we want to make sure that the victim is taken to account as well. It's a hard decision for everybody involved.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you for realizing that. Okay, now it's time for the board to ask questions, and we always have one lead interviewer and then the others follow that. So our lead on this is Pete Freeman. Pete?
Okay. All right. How old are you, Mr. Bauer?
I am 33 years old.
And how long have you been in prison?
7 years.
Okay, you have a 25-year sentence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you ever use drugs and alcohol?
No, sir.
Okay. You have no write-ups. You're in medium custody. What did you learn when you took your sex offender treatment classes?
Well, let's see. Sorry, I'm nervous.
What you learned.
Sex offender class has taught me, it has brought to the realization the problem that I have. It has brought it out, and it showed me, as before, I did not exactly see what I was doing and why. But through the sex offender treatment program, it has brought to my attention the problem I have or had.
All right, what other classes have you taken that you gained the most out of?
I have taken victims awareness, which was fairly similar to the sex offender class also.
All right, I
I
just
have-
want to note for the record that the sheriff, DA, and judge strongly opposed. We just heard from his mother. She's unopposed. The victim are opposed. They feel like it's a travesty of justice because you hadn't even served a 30-year sentence. And you do to get out. Along with the grandfather, grandmother, aunt, uncle, they're all opposed. I have no further questions.
Ms. Stephanie?
I did hear you say that the problem you have or had in the sex offender class, the problem that happened with this child at 6 years old is a problem that has a high recidivism rate. So it's kind of like an alcoholic. Did they teach you that?
Yes, ma'am.
So it really for you is going to be an issue for the rest of your life that you'll have to fight, just like alcoholism or being an addict or any kind of thing. So I hope that you keep that in mind.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
that's all I have to say.
I don't have any questions. Are we prepared to vote?
I'm prepared to vote.
Okay,
Okay, Mr. Barr, bottom line is, you only served 7 of 25 years. That's not near enough for this crime. You're doing a great job. I encourage you to keep it up. There's also a price to pay. You've hurt a lot of people and you've ruined a lot of lives. So my vote today, due to law enforcement and victim opposition and lack of time served, is to deny.
Yes, sir.
And I concur with Mr. Freeman.
okay. And I also concur with that. I think certainly you're on the right path, taking these classes. I want to leave you on a positive note that you're doing that. But quite frankly, I just think that a third of the sentence on a reduced plea bargain on sex with a 6-year-old is not nearly sufficient time to be paroled or even consider parole. So the decision board unanimous that you be denied today, and we wish you luck. Thank you. End of this hearing.
All these cockroaches, they're all the same. They're all the same. He starts off his statement by stating, "Oh, I haven't seen my son ever. He's 7 years old now." And, he goes through this thing how he's changed. And then he has a little bit, a tiny bit where he says, what do you say? I'm sorry for what I put my victims through. Then he goes on to say, I never meant to cause any harm or problems. Like, who says that? Who says I never meant to cause any harm or problems? But you just, it's like, the guy he's a sick roach. And to think, again, another with these weak sentences where, yeah, they gave him 25 years, but which is, yes, that's more than we've seen with these cases. Normally it's just a few years, but he is getting paroled anyways in a couple years. He's fixed to get out 7 years into his 25-year sentence. He, God bless Miss Stapleton, the new victims advocate. She states the facts that we know, but it doesn't seem that anyone else in the judicial system understands, which is that he's not a low risk. She says, it's like an alcoholic. It's like anything else. This is your obsession. This is your addiction. When he says when he says that I'm cured, the problem that I had, you know, or he actually said the quite words, Richard wrote it out, the problem that I have or had. You know, the mother was here watching the parole hearing, and I cut it out in the editing completely. Both mothers were watching, his mother and the victim's mother. And the reason I cut the victim's mother is that it looked like she was trying to hide her face. Now, she didn't understand that she could watch the parole hearing with the camera off. But at the end of the hearing, when they denied, she showed her face and she stared down this cockroach. At least that's how it looked on the screen. And again, I'm not showing it only because I believe that she didn't want to be seen. She didn't understand that she's allowed to turn the screen off. Many understand that you can turn the screen off, but listen in. So I'm taking a side of caution here. But she stared him down at the end there. And that's just, you know, we can't, it's just to understand. And I wish the DA would have showed up. I wish the DA would have showed up. They need to show up to talk for to be the victim's voice in this matter. And I don't know, you know, we don't have any details of this crime. The article, I'll read to you what Richard found. So in 2016, he was being held without bond for indecent behavior with a juvenile and aggravated sexual assault. So that's full on. That's why he got the 25-year sentence. He could have gotten life, but he took a plea deal. It was following a complaint that he had done this to the 6-year-old. It was going, he said he was going to go before the grand jury in October. If convicted, he'd face life in prison. And then it goes on to say, in quotes, "We hope to resolve the case as quickly as possible," said Sheriff Kevin Cobb. "Our main objective for the child is to be safe and secure from this day forward." Cobb said the child was interviewed with Children Advocacy Center of Northeast Louisiana in connection with the case. According to the Center of Children and Families, the umbrella agency for the program, the services in the CAC can only be accessed through law enforcement social services. Before the CAC, child victims would have to talk about their experience to several different agencies and officials. The child could be moved all over the region to numerous different locations in order to fulfill the required examination, interview, assessment. I guess they're talking about how it's improved. But yeah, they don't ask questions. They don't, you know, I guess they just knew they were going to deny. They didn't want to. Sometimes the parole board will ask questions, try to get some insight. But hey, at least the parole board didn't say. And you know something else that they didn't talk about in this case? And I think the parole board, I wonder if it's the parole board that is making this decision not to talk about this. But they did not bring up the risk score. They did not bring up that he is a low risk score. And I'm going to share with you the statewide collaborative static 9-9 10-point questionnaire that is used to determine a risk score. And I'm going to tell you that he would have risked low. He would have been considered a low risk. And our victim advocate, Miss Stapleton, she said, no, you ain't a low risk. You're going to be struggling with this your entire life. You're forever going through risk, which is common sense to anyone who's a sheeple like us who doesn't have a PhD. But here's the static 9-9 that all the states somehow collaborated on to use. You know, it's impossible to have our states agree on anything, right? For there to be any type of but somehow they all agree on this, and I guess because it's just children, who cares? And you know, Richard was telling me about this, that this form was actually made, I think, in the year 2000 over a study of 1,000 male sex offenders. So think about how relevant that is. So anyways, this is the purpose of the test is to get 10 questions. If you're taking the test, you want to have a low risk score. A low risk score is the fewest amount of points possible. So low would be -3 to 1 point. Moderate is 2 to 3 points. Moderate high is 4 to 5 points, and high is 6+. 10-point questionnaire. So let's go through the questionnaire. This is what they use when they determine the risk score. So what's your age? You fill out this form, right? Now, if you're 60 or older, by the way, you get to start -3 points. You get to start almost to the extent where it's going to be really difficult now to ever be considered anything but a low risk score. If you want to think about that, how insane the test starts off to begin with. Now, he was 25 years old at the time of the crime, so he will get 1 point for this. So he's still at a low risk. He has 1 point. Now, have you ever lived with a lover for at least 2 years? Can you imagine that that's a question, as we all know that so many of these cockroaches live with the parent of their victim? If you say yes, it's 0 points. If you say no, it's 1 point. Again, make that make sense. That makes no sense. We all know that these cockroaches have lovers. I think maybe we could assume that he did, being that he has had a child, and he can also lie. So let's say, I mean, I assume he would have said yes. I just assume he'd say that. Index of now this is the strange redundant questions. Non-sexual violence, any convictions? He would have said no, because we know he has no record. Prior any convictions? He would have said no, because he has no record. Prior these offenses, he would have said no. But by the way, keep in mind that if you had a prior sex offense and you click yes, you only get 1 point for that. So that would mean that if you were above the age of 60 and you had -3 points, and then you said that you did have a prior violent sexual offense and you did have a prior sex offense, you would still be a low risk. Okay? I hope I'm not losing you here. Now, prior sentencing dates, if you had 3 or less dates, or 4 or more dates. So if you had 3 or less sentencing dates, you're 0 points. Does that make any sense? Any convictions for non-contact sex offenses. So I guess, like, I don't know, exposing yourself. If you say no, 0 points. Any unrelated victims. Again, how does this make any sense? Unrelated victims? So again, if your victim is your next door neighbor, you still score 0 for this. Any unrelated, if they're not related to you. Now, I don't understand what this means. So if you say no, it's 0 points. If you say yes, then you get a point. I don't even understand that. Any stranger victim. So if you say yes, that the victim's a stranger, you get a point. No, it's 0 points. So, and then here's the kicker. Any male victims. So if your victim is a male, by the way, then it's a 0. Then it's a point. But if not, you again square out 0. So he would have scored a low risk score. I'm sorry if this was like it's confusing. It's confusing because it makes no sense. But if you want to play around, let's pretend he was 60 years old and he lived with his mother. Well, he lived with a wife for 30 years who had a child, which was his child, and had multiple offenses. He would still rank out as a low score. I think he'd actually have a 0. Because you start off -3 since you're over 60. Then he gets, he has no prior offenses. No. But he has a related victim. So you get my point. He'd still be a 0. And that makes a lot of sense to anyone who's not a sheeple. But here we go. Here we have it. We've seen how broken the system is. And maybe that's why the parole board's not bringing it up, which I would love. And with that,
I did hear you say that the problem you have or had in the sex offender class, the problem that happened with this child at 6 years old is a problem that has a high recidivism rate. So it's kind of like an alcoholic. Did they teach you that?
Yes, ma'am.
So it really, for you, is going to be an issue for the rest of your life that you'll have to fight, just like alcoholism or being an addict or any kind of thing. So I hope that you keep that in mind.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
that's all I have to say.